Hi, I'm Arati, and today I'm taking you with me to Putney Bridge. I've got to go and collect some books that I designed more than a year ago, but I'm rewarding myself for this schlep down to Putney by visiting Jackson's Art in Fulham. You get off at Putney Bridge Station, turn right out the station, and Jackson's is just a step or two away. I don't often visit a Jackson's Art store. This one is the closest to me and it's about an hour away by tube. Usually I would order online, but it's always nice to go in store and have a look and poke around and see what's new and what I haven't clocked online before. Associated with the original Jackson's Art Fulham is run independently, and it is really well placed for most of West and Southwest London. After asking for permission to film, I wandered around the store, taking in everything, figuring out where things were, and basically having a good nosy round. In addition to visiting the store and seeing what I could find, I was in search of a few things. I needed paper, I needed to replace some of my gouache, and I also wanted to see what else I could come across. Like all the best art stores, this was a higgledy-piggledy mix of corridors and little rooms and areas where you could go and explore and see what there was. It was well organized, all the paper was together, all the brushes were together, a particular type of paint was together, so you could very easily find what you wanted once you knew the layout of the store. It is small but packed full of goodies. So once I'd oriented myself, it was time to begin looking for the things that I actually came here for, starting with paper. Specifically, I was looking for A5 pads in heavyweight paper that I could use with gouache. I will do a little mini haul at the end of this video and show you exactly what I got. But here I am just poking around, feeling the paper, having a jolly good time with my internal monologue, thinking about what I'd use it for, how I felt about it, the kind of paper it was, whether it would suit my purposes or not, going back and forth between different pads and trying to decide which one and getting both. My usual policy in a shop is not to touch things unless I actually want them, because as you know, if you've watched any of my videos, I am on a low buy year this year for art supplies. So if I touch it, I feel like buying it. So sometimes I don't touch it if I don't need it, and that kind of helps me to not buy things. But really there was loads I wanted in this particular section. Look at those lovely drawing boards, all the Saunders Waterford paper, the Arches. Oh, it was so good. But I did need some watercolor paper, so I did touch the Langtons. I didn't want the spiral bound. I'm not a huge fan of spiral bound pads, but they did also have gummed pads, and this one looked pretty good. It was on par with the usual paper that I use, which is Fabriano. Then after I got that, I entered a slight danger zone of where they had sketchbooks galore. There were so many that I wanted here, so obviously I didn't touch any. There was Fabriano, there was all the pastel paper, and of course there were the Stillman and Burns. Now I really don't need any extra sketchbooks right now, but I do have these in my eye. They're on my wish list, and I would love to get maybe an Alpha or one of the Zeta series sketchbooks. Definitely not one of these spiral bound ones though. In addition to the Stillman and Burn, Fabriano, Bristol paper and so on, there was also a selection of handmade khadi papers and an entire bunch of A1, A0, A3 sheets of paper, including some round ones, and handmade paper, oil paper, acrylic paper, all sorts. Since the paper section was in the back of the shop, I made my way through, past mediums and gilding supplies, tapes, all sorts of little accessories that you can use for art making. I had a really good look through the gessos and the tapes because I do need some in the future, so I was just making a reference note for shopping online later. So I moved back towards the front of the shop where there was a bunch of acrylics, brushes, inks, and a whole section of soft pastels, oil pastels. Oh, look at the colors on these things. They were displayed so beautifully, and I was very, very, very tempted to get some of them, but I know that I don't like dry media like soft pastels, so I did resist. There was, I felt, quite an extensive selection of pastels of all sorts, including, as you can see here, Rembrandt, some pan pastels, there was Sennelier, there were other pastels that I'd never even heard of before, but then I'm not that into them, and I have a whole set of Sennelier, so I was just looking at this for color inspiration and not actually with the intention of buying. It did make me dream though of having a studio big enough to display all my art materials like this, where I could access them whenever I wanted, however I wanted, and it would provide a watercolor. But I guess we all dream of that, hey? But then after the pastels, we moved on to something that I was very tempted by: pencils, lots and lots of Derwent pencils. These were so beautifully displayed and I did not resist picking them up. There were inks on the other side, but it was the pencils I went back to, and I saw these Derwent Graphitint pencils. I have seen the paints both through Monkey Mintaka and other people on YouTube and Instagram, but I did not realize that they came in pencil form. So I checked out a few of them and I did end up getting two, which I will show you at the end of this video. If you like muted, deep colors with that graphite tone to them, these are the pencils for you. All of the colors looked so tempting, and I would definitely use them in my work. But as I said, I'm on a low buy year, so I did kind of try to resist temptation by only getting two when I wanted to get the full set. They also had a fair number of whites and grays, but I could only find one white pencil, and with that the lead was broken off anyway, so I didn't end up buying it. Before I made my way further down this aisle, there were inks and pens on the opposite side, but these are not something that I use on a regular basis, so I didn't get any. There were a fair number of Caran d'Ache products as well, including the Neo Colors and some of their pens too. Now, Neo Color 1 is something I don't really have. Neo Pastel, I do have a few, and I'll show you them in a video soon. I think I've already tested them out in a previous art haul. I was pretty impressed by the vast selection of Neo Color color range, as well as all of the luminance and the aquarelle pencils from Caran d'Ache. There were a whole bunch of pens as well as some graphite, but I didn't get any of them. I was quite impressed with being able to resist. There were also other brands of pencils and aquarelle pencils, lots and lots of Conti pencils and sketching pencils, plenty of graphite options in different colors. I didn't really look at these much because I have plenty already. There was a really good selection of Faber-Castell. This is the Albrecht Dürer, which is their watercolor pencil range. I do have one set of a few pencils and I really love them. Did pick up a Mars Lumograph in 9B just to compare it with my Pitt Graphite Matte pencil of 14B, which unfortunately they did not have in stock here. They did though have a wide selection of other pencils for Conti, crayon, Inktense block type things, Creta color. There are a bunch of markers up here that I couldn't reach. I'm pretty short. But Faber-Castell Polychromos had a really good selection as well. I have switched my allegiance to the Luminance by Caran d'Ache, but I still do love the Polychromos pencil for detailed work. The selection of giftable sets here was also pretty good, but their marker selection wasn't huge. I didn't see any Tombos actually, and their letter set markers were right next to the spray paint. So I guess they had some sort of relation to that. I wasn't interested in the spray paints, but I was interested in the watercolor markers from Winsor & Newton, of which there were very few. Beyond this was an array of watercolor tubes and half pans and all sorts. I'm not a big watercolor person. I have enough to be getting on with, but I was very fascinated to see the number of different brands, the number of different colors, the number of different formats that these come in. I might try it again sometime. There was loads of Daniel Smith, again very tempted, but I know that I won't be using them, so I didn't get any. It was fascinating to see that the selection of wet watercolor tubes was slightly larger than that of dry half pans. I'm wondering whether that's something to do with the clientele of the shop or whether that's just how they stocked it. It's also the first time I saw these Core QOR watercolors. I've heard of them before. If you have some, comment below and tell me how you like them. Walking through this paint section was absolute bliss because this is my happy place. I even noticed these extra fine watercolor sticks, which I've actually never used before and might be interested to try sometime in the future. Of course, there was the usual selection of really good, very reliable Winsor & Newton paints. Both watercolor, and then further in there was exactly what I came for, which is gouache. This was a good selection of colors and I did find what I was looking for. I'll show you later. and there was a huge selection of oils, both water mixable as well as proper oils. Jackson's Fulham is also surprisingly one of the few places where I found a selection of Schminke gouache on display. Thus far, I've only been able to shop for them online. I've never actually seen them in store. The selection of oils was really quite extensive. I think if you're an oil painter, this would really be your happy place, and you would come in here and find pretty much whatever you wanted. I used to paint flowers in oils when I was a teenager, but I haven't really touched them since. Maybe I should try at some point. Especially since water mixable oils have now become a thing, and I don't think it's as toxic as it used to be, or so on and so forth. But anyway, I came here for gouache, and gouache I have found. I am basically topping up the colors that have run out, or that I know that I'm going to run out of very, very soon. Usually I'd order these online, but it's always nice to come in store and actually touch things and look at them and feel what you want and what you need. Of course, I also went across to the Schminke Horadam gouache, which is my new favorite thing. It's more expensive than the Winsor & Newton, but I am trying to slowly replace some of the colors with these. After I acquired my gouache stash, I went around to the center of the store, where I did find a selection of Liquitex, Tombow, Copic, and a few other markers, and an excellent selection of brushes. Oh my goodness, there were so many good brushes, and I have put a fair few on my wish list for the future. Having acquired both my books and my art stash, it was time to head home. So let me show you exactly what I got. Remember when I said my gouache was replacements? This is why, because half of my tubes are empty or beginning to be empty, because I've been working on these Folktale Week drawings that use a lot of indigo and ochre, Van Dyke brown and burnt umber. So I got 2 tubes of Winsor & Newton indigo. It's an absolutely beautiful color, and also an extra tube of yellow ochre. Then I got some raw umber to deepen that yellow ochre when needed. And I got a replacement for my flesh tint, which is now called Rose Pale. I got some Lamp Black and also another sepia to replace that. Then I got my usual Van Dyke Brown, which is half finished. And lastly, I got some Winsor & Newton Olive Green, which is one of my favorites. But I also got a Horadam one from Schminke, so that I can see which one I prefer and then have that. In terms of the pencils, I got a Staedtler Lumograph in 9B. I hope that this will be really nice and dark. And then in the Derwent Graphitint pencils, I got Ocean Blue and Green Grey, and I really hope that these will fit well into my current stash. Finally, the paper, I got the smooth heavyweight paper from Arati. These are the sketches that I did in the last Odd Orange session, where we were drawing my dog, and I finished my stash of A5 papers. I also got the fine grain heavyweight, also from Arati, and the Langton mold made watercolored paper. I bought this specifically to use with my Caran d'Ache Supracolor watercolor pencils. Anyway, so this was my haul. Let me just show you how the pencils work. I'll do a separate video for updated gouache swatches. I have changed quite a lot of colors since I did my last swatching video 3 years ago, which I will link for you here and in the description box below. But anyway, let's move on to these pencils. This is the Staedtler Lumograph 9B. Really, really nice, very smooth, a little bit shiny. Then here is the Green Grey from Derwent Graphitint. Absolutely beautiful color. I can see myself sketching in this. This one is Ocean Blue. Again, an absolutely beautiful color. I can see it going very well in my color palette. Here's a closer look. I also just want to show you the Pitt Graphite Matte 14B in comparison to the Lumograph. This is it. It's super, super dark, but it also doesn't have a shininess to it, which the Mars Lumograph still does, and which most graphite pencils will have. I'm not sure if it's showing up on camera here, but you can see it gets slightly lighter when you tilt it towards the light, whereas the graphite matte does not. Thanks for coming shopping with me. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!